Hello everyone, welcome to my presentation. Today I will be discussing Sun, Ice, Mist and Snow, Exploring Sin and Suffering in the Rime of the Ancient Mariner by Samuel Taylor Coleridge. In analyzing the poem, I will be applying the techniques of defamiliarization and foregrounding. Allow me to explain what I understand when I say defamiliarization. So it is basically a way of thinking in images. So the poet, instead of creating images, actually arranges them. So we can see this in the Rime of the Ancient Mariner. So the poetic imagery is used to create the strongest possible impression, and the purpose of art is to impart the sensation of things as they are perceived and not as they are known. As for the technique of foregrounding, it is to place in the foreground the act of expression, the act of speech itself. So basically, devices are being used and it consists in the consistency and systematic character of foregrounding. So basically in poetry, words are being used, words from the English lexicon. However, they are used in a way to present messages in aesthetic forms. So the author uses particular words and patterns of words, for example, repetition, to foreground an idea, which is often the theme of the poem. So this is the image that is going to direct the presentation today, or my analysis. So I will be exploring how sun, ice, mist and snow, these elements of nature, are being presented in the poem to convey the themes of sin and suffering. And there are patterns to how these motifs are mentioned. All right, so there are the sequences and patterns. There are also internal relationships between these elements, and then they also mutually support each other. All right, so when I analyze the verses, I will be asking two questions. Number one, what is the image that is being drawn and perceived? Number two, what is the idea that is being foregrounded? Before I read the stanzas about the elements of nature, I will first read the stanzas that mentioned the bright-eyed mariner. Alright, it is an ancient mariner, and he stoppeth one of three by thy long grey beard and glittering eye. Now wherefore stoppest thou me? He holds him with his glittering eye. The wedding guest stood still, and listens like a 3 years child. The mariner hath his will. The wedding guest sat on a stone. He cannot choose but hear, and thus spake on that ancient man, the bright-eyed mariner. The wedding guest he beat his breast, yet he cannot choose but hear, and thus spake on that ancient man, the bright-eyed mariner. The mariner whose eye is bright, whose beard with age is hoar, is gone, and now with the wedding guest turned from the bridegroom's door. As you can see, the phrase the glittering eye and the bright-eyed mariner are mentioned a few times repetitively. So what is the image that is being drawn and perceived? So basically the presence of the mariner is intriguing, and then there are words being used such as bright eye and ancient and also glittering, making the guest unable to look away and be distracted. So the glittering eye and this brightness, right, they actually represents the image of the sun. So the image of the sun is still quite a positive aspect in the poem as of now. And then what is the idea that is being foregrounded? So it is a narrative that focuses on the storytelling of the mariner. The mariner is basically retelling his journey. That is why there is this repetition of the words mariner and the wedding guest. So in the next part, we can see how the glittering eyes prelude the sun, which is going to be a prominent feature in the text. So the sun, even though it was not mentioned in the earlier stanzas, the glittering eyes, the bright-eyed mariner, those are the phrases that are going to prelude that element of nature. So it is just the beginning, and the sin and suffering stage has yet to begin. Now we can see how the sun is being described in the poem in a very aesthetic manner, and conveying messages that are actually very deep. So let me just read the stanzas first. The sun came up upon the left, out of the sea came he, and he shone bright, and on the right went down into the sea. The sun now rose upon the right, out of the sea came he, still hid in mist, and on the left went down into the sea. And straight the sun was flecked with bars. Heaven's mother sent us grace, as if through a dungeon grate he peered with broad and burning face. Alas, thought I, and my heart beat loud, how fast she nears and nears! Are those her sails that glance in the sun like restless gossameres? Are those her ribs through which the sun did peer as through a grate? And is that a woman, all her crew? Is that a death? And are there two? Is death that woman's mate? So the element of nature here, the sun, is actually a very important keyword. It is repeated multiple times, and it is actually a very dominant force. So that is the image I believe that is being drawn and perceived about the sun. So the images drawn in the poems revolve around the sun as it rises and sets, and I believe this actually indicates the days of the sailors. The pattern is changing, as you can see in the stanzas in the previous slide. It no longer represents light. It no longer represents brightness. So what has changed? At the end of part one, we discovered that the mariner shot the albatross that actually tried to help them and led them to safety. Hence, the image of the sun became darker and darker. The brightness of the mariner's eyes is no more. So what is the idea being foregrounded in the images here? So the sun signals the days changing, and the days are not looking good at all. Day and night get very unstable for the mariner or a sailor, and it also represents stability amid unpredictability. It can also mean light and brightness that is in decline. And then there's also this very interesting mention of great and ribs, which indicates that the sun is now a prison for the mariner who has sinned. So the brightness is no longer a positive aspect. The sun now becomes this very dominating force and is causing the mariner to feel very imprisoned and trapped. Another element of nature I would like to discuss is actually ice. Let me just read to you the stanzas first. And now there came both mist and snow, and it grew wondrous cold, and ice mast high came floating by as green as emerald, and through the drifts the snowy cliffs did send a dismal sheen, nor shapes of man nor beast we can, the ice was all between. The ice was here, the ice was there, the ice was all around. It crackled and growled and roared and howled like noises in a swoon. So you can see here that the I stanzas are actually earlier. So this is before the albatross was shot by the mariner. So it does actually represent a few ideas. What is the image that is being drawn and perceived around the notion of ice in the poem? So the ice was crackling and breaking, and the sailors were surrounded by it before the albatross appeared. So it is another overwhelming presence. You have the sun just now, and then this crackling, this very unpredictable behavior poses threat and danger that the sailors are fearful of. Uh, so what is the idea that is being foregrounded here? So it can be the opposite of the sun. So as the sun or the brightness is in decline, that is when the ice started to crackle. So the ice itself is a character in the poem that threatens the safety of the sailors. So that is the artistic impression of it. It has this very beastly feature. So the albatross came to save the sailors from the beastly threat, but it ended up being killed, and this enhanced the degree of the mariner's sin. So now we are getting clearer, or we are receiving a clearer picture on how the mariner has sinned. So later we can see, because he has sinned, what are the consequences that he is to face. The last element that I will be discussing here, there are actually a lot more, but I'm focusing on these few ones to show how they are all connected to each other. So the elements are basically a combination of mist and snow. Let me just read to you the stanzas first. And now there came both mist and snow, and it grew wondrous cold, and ice must high came floating by, as green as emerald. And some in dreams assured were of the spirit that plagued us so. 9 fathom deep he had followed us from the land of mist and snow. Under the keel 9 fathom deep, from the land of mist and snow, the spirits slid, and it was he that made the ship to go. The sails at noon left off their tune, and the ship stood still also. The spirit who biddeth by himself in the land of mist and snow, he loved the bird that loved the man who shot him with his bow. The stanzas that mention mist and snow are actually the stanzas that indicate that the darkness is coming for the sailors, particularly the mariner, because there is mention of the spirit who loved the albatross. So, what would the spirit bring? Obviously, not great things. So, yes, first of all, what is the image that is being drawn and perceived? Okay, so there is this mention that the spirit came from the land of mist and snow. So obviously there is this vital association with the notion of darkness, this notion of dreams being lost in a place where we are not sure of. And then there's also this movement of the spirit who loved the bird that the mariner has killed. So why is the spirit there? Is he for vengeance? Is he for retribution? All right, and then he came from the land of mist and snow. So a lot of these elements are being illustrated in almost a deathly, hollow tone. So what is the idea that is being foregrounded here? So mist and snow, of course, opposite of the sun, as we can see in the stanzas. Light, brightness are no longer there. So now it's just darkness. Spirits are showing up, and then things are unclear because they were surrounded by fog, by misty air. So darkness and uncertainty then became more pronounced. So I do believe that these are the consequences of the sin committed by the mariner. So because he shot the albatross, and now they are being surrounded by mist and snow, so the spirit caused the sailors suffering. So inflicting suffering on the sailors and the mariner is the spirit's way of giving back what the pain that they have caused the spirit. So that is what I believe in terms of suffering that is being illustrated. Now I will discuss the visuals of the repetitive keywords, because this is how I read the poem. So the repetitive keywords basically draw these images. And what images are those? For me, they are mainly of these elements of nature that actually symbolize a deeper layer of human, these very humanistic themes of sin and suffering. So we have sun, ice, mist, and snow. Sun, ice, mist, and snow. And then in every stanza that mentions them, they're actually quite related in terms of the flow. Because sun in the beginning represents brightness and light. As you can see during the wedding, obviously everything was cheerful, and you can basically see things brightened up. And then as the story of the mariner began, there is this description of the sun becoming a prison, and then the ice because the sea was becoming dangerous, and then mist and snow after they shot the albatross. After the albatross died, they were surrounded by mist and snow, and the spirit appeared to come and hurt them. So all of this actually illustrates sequences and patterns, internal relationship between these three elements, and mutually supporting parts. So the three images are linked to foreground ideas. They are continuous and mutually dependent. So what are these ideas? So there is a notion of light represented by the sun turning dark, mist and snow. So why are they these changes. So the changes occurring was caused by the sin of the mariner, which led to the suffering of the sailors and him. And as you can see, a lot of sufferings, a lot of bad things happened to the sailors, and they actually did blame him. They did recognize, you caused this, and now we are the one who have to bear the burden. So ordinary language, the keywords of sun, ice, and mist and snow, is being defamiliarized, and then the artistic impact is much grounded on the theme of sin and suffering. So I do believe the techniques are really applied so marvelously well in the poem. Now I shall conclude my presentation. Nature features very strongly in order to represent familiar yet powerful, overwhelming forces. As we all know, nature is actually something we can visualize. However, I think the poet managed to defamiliarize it really, really well. The way he described elements of nature in the poem uh, uh, are really impactful and gives a lot of darker and deeper meanings. Symbolism features heavily as well, with the images of nature being utilized in a repetitive pattern, and this pattern shows that the keywords or the elements of nature being mutually supporting, and they're always interlinked. Imagery focuses on the surroundings, gives rise to meanings in the poem. So imagery, they are not images per se. They actually represent certain themes that can be unpacked further. So for me, the poem is a narrative in images with a consistent flow of light turning dark. And the semantic unity of the keywords ice, sun, ice, mist, and snow reveals the thematics of sin and suffering in the poem. So this flow of light turning dark, I feel like it really allows the reader to investigate and explore this sin and suffering, which actually revolved a lot around the mariner, the person telling the story in the poem. So yes, I do believe that is a great poem discussing notions of sin and suffering via these elements of nature. Thank you so much for watching the video. I really appreciate it. Here are my references.